Community Heart Media. Your voice, your heart, your opportunity. Welcome to tonight's show.
Hey, it's a Wednesday night again on Community Heart Radio. It's Mark and Julio here. We've got a special guest tonight. But Julio, I want to start off because tonight is all about you, mate. Tonight is about you. You're going to learn so much because I can't believe it. Someone's written a book just for you. Amazing.
Really?
So they've got you in mind and they've written a book. So Mary-Beth, it's just great to have you here. How are you going?
I am going really well. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Julio. And I'm so glad that the book is targeted to you, Julio. So I'm excited to take you through it and talk about it.
Yeah, that'd be really good.
Really excited for Julio because he's really needed something. He's been searching for something all year, and tonight's going to be his night. So it's absolutely fantastic, Mary-Beth, to have you on board. But before we get into the book that you've written, we just want to get to know a bit about yourself. Just tell us a bit about your journey.
Thanks, Mark. And thank you, Julio. My journey started, obviously, many years ago when I wanted to be a singer, and I decided that I wanted to be a professional singer, and I spent many years doing that. And then there came a point in time where I realized that wasn't really what I wanted to do, and I needed to pivot. And I decided I wanted to work in the corporate space. Now, I've always been a lifelong learner, interested in new things, and it seemed logical to fall into technology and what technology had to offer. And now I sit at the C-suite and Chief Information Officer space. And so really my journey has gone from singer to CIO, and it kind of plays very nicely into the new book. So I think at the book launch, Mark, that you came to, and thank you so much for being there, I talked a lot about that moment when you know that you're not in the right role and that it's time for a change. And the question that I ask is, what do you do?
Yeah, we're going to speak a lot about change tonight because I think a lot of people find change quite hard. And that's why it's all about you, Julio, tonight, mate, because I think you find change very hard, mate. Would you be true?
Yep, that's me. I'll just stick to everything. Flat white for the last 25 years, and that's me, basically.
So the thought of change, Julio, terrifies you, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
But Mary-Beth, just tell us a bit about the backstory. I mean, you're a singer. I gather you're a singer. Life's going quite well, and suddenly you think, "Oh, I'm in the wrong job." Sort of what was going on for you?
What was the catalyst?
Yeah.
I think I just sung at one too many weddings, one too many footy club grand finals, and I guess it just wasn't floating my boat anymore. And I think that that's really what it was. And I hadn't achieved, and I think this is really important. I had a vision of where I wanted my singing career to go, and I had not achieved that. And I got to a point where I thought, is it worth me continuing on with this, or should I look at something else? And I was always really interested in that corporate space. I had a lot of friends in that space, and I thought, gee, that sounds really interesting. What would be really nice is to work 9 to 5. Although in saying that, I've never worked 9 to 5 at all in a corporate space, but working very, very late nights, singing and doing those sorts of things, I knew I needed that change, and I really wanted to, I needed something that was going to propel my career in the direction that I wanted it to go.
Yeah, Look, we're going to get Kelly coming in now, but this area of contentment, Mary-Beth, is an interesting area because obviously the story could have gone like this, that you're a famous singer singing at weddings and functions and everyone loves you singing. You could have then gone into the corporate space and found, oh, hang on, actually I like singing. So sometimes it goes that way, does it? Or do you ever go back?
Absolutely. I'm not a go back sort of person. I think there are some people that do that. I'm just not that. I'm one of those individuals that when I've done something and I feel that I've done it to a point that I'm happy, it gave me joy for a period of time, it's time to move on, I tend to not go back. So for me, going back and singing again, that's sort of not something that I'm like, well, I kind of done that. So how is it going to be any different the next time I do it? Which is leads me nicely into that piece in the book. And I know we don't sort of talk too much about the book to start with, but it really is about understanding what brings you joy. What were the transferable skills you had? And then what's the next step? What's the next thing look like? And it's completely okay to be comfortable in role and be comfortable where you're at. But for some people, they don't like that. They want to be in that uncomfortable space, and they want to keep pushing and accelerating their career in different directions. Might not be for everybody, but if it is for you, or you are just feeling very complacent in your job and you're no longer feeling the joy that you once had, then it's time to start looking at that new thing.
Mary, lovely to meet you, and thank you to all our listeners and viewers. What I was going to ask you was, what do you have with your journey or clients you've had where people often find it challenging to sit back, to reflect, and to go, what brings me joy, when they're used to just doing the norm, or to be thinking, oh, well, I used to enjoy that. Do I still enjoy it now?
Well, you spend most of your career doing SWOT analysis, the PESTLE analysis, doing all these other analysis. Why wouldn't you do that for your career? Why wouldn't you sit back and actually and think that through? In the book, I have basically a matrix that you fill in, and you actually really start to think about it. And I've taken people through that, and I've asked them to go,
what do we do this, Mary-Beth? What would be
I
the
was going to
first
say,
question you'd ask
I can make one there.
Julio? What would be the first question you'd ask Julio from this matrix? Let's just test it out here. The matrix. What would be the first question you'd ask him?
What I'd ask Julio to do is to think about his very first job, the very first job he ever did, and how joyous was that? On a scale of 0 to 10, how joyous was it? What was it about that job that made it joyous? So, Julio, over to you, buddy. Think about your very first job.
My very first job was a orderly in a hospital.
Oh, wow.
Did you enjoy it?
So, yes, I actually did.
Okay. So from 0 to 10?
0 to 10, I'll say about an 8.
An 8. Okay.
Yes.
So what was it? What was some of maybe 3 or 4 of the things that brought you joy? What were the things that you really enjoyed about it?
Interactions with the patients. So
that was it.
That was the biggest thing, because I was in a survival environment. So people are getting better from strokes and looking after them. So that was pretty good. And for a young kid my age at 17, 18, it was a pretty awesome experience.
So what I'd ask you then, Julio, is to think about the next job, and then the next job, and start doing the same thing. Think about what it was. And then when you've done that, look at each of those jobs and think about, what were the skills you learned? So what you learnt there was interconnection, stakeholder engagement, as an example, in that very first job. And then are those skills transferable to something else? Because you will always have a transferable skill that you might not see. So if we bring it back, Kelly, to my original, when I wanted to move from singing into that corporate space, I had no idea about any of that. And I met a sponsor, somebody who saw something in me. Wow. And she had seen, so I'd interviewed for temping roles. So temping roles back in the day were when you'd go into a client site for maybe 1 or 2 days, you're backfilling a sick receptionist, or you're doing those sorts of things. And I was interviewing, and I went to about 30 interviews, and none of the temping agencies were interested. They wanted to talk a lot about the singing stuff, and they thought that was really fascinating and interesting, but none of them were willing to put me in a client site. And then I met one woman who sat back, and she said to me, "You look really familiar." And then she'd happened to be at one of my gigs, and I thought, well, that's really interesting. And so she started to ask me questions around, what did it take to what did it take to plan a gig? What do you need to do? And I started to talk about how you have to deal with the customer, have to deal with an agent, so your stakeholders, how you need to organize all of your equipment. From Julio's perspective, Julio, you would know this, Julio, in that you need to know the space, the size of the space, to understand the equipment with which to hire so that you can actually fill that space with sound, right?
Yeah.
Really important.
Mm.
Do you need fallback? Do you not need fallback? All those sorts of things. And so there was a lot of logistics involved, basically project management. And she was starting to throw these words at me. And I thought, I have no idea what this woman is saying to me, because I had no idea. But we started to talk, and she realized, and she said, all of these things that you've done are transferable.
Mm.
And that's the first time I'd heard that. And that was many years ago. And so that's really what the joy matrix is about. It's really about thinking about what brings you joy, what's transferable in those skills, and trying to find roles, or thinking about those roles which are interesting to you, that will bring you joy. If you can get 60% joy and understand that about 40, maybe 30 to 40% is going to be the minutiae of the job with which you have to do. But if you can get that 60, 70% joy out of a role, I think that's pretty amazing. And that's really what I advocate for the people that I work with.
Wow.
About
Sounds
Mary,
good.
when you've had experiences, is it often worth going into those experiences which you didn't enjoy? I can speak of one. I can think of off the top of my head. I'm not a numbers person. My first job was, ironically, in radio and being part of a board of trustees through a student representative. But one of my jobs I had, and it was to do with numbers and figures and procurement. I could not stand it. It was my weakness. But, is it sometimes worth, going through those sort of things too?
Absolutely. You learned something, didn't you?
Yeah.
What you learned out of that. They're data points that you learned. You learned, I don't really like numbers, but what you did learn is, but I can do that. Right? I can do that. And a lot of the time we shy away from those things that we don't feel comfortable with, because we think, oh, I can't do that. And then that little perfectionist voice comes in and says, oh, but you might not be perfect, and you're never going to be perfect. That's just an illusion.
Mary-Beth, I reckon that your job now, if you're into technology and you're a singer, there's a lot of difference between singing and IT, isn't there? How did you go from that to where you are now? You're a chief information officer, hey? And
Yes.
that's a pretty high up role. I don't know, how did the singing and the technology, how did you go from one to the other?
Well, I was temping, and my very first temping assignment was at a little company. This is going to make you laugh. It's this little company in South Bank called Apple Computer. And I went into this office. They needed a receptionist. I remember answering the phone and saying, Apple Computers, Mary-Beth speaking, and the general manager coming and selling me off and saying to me, it's Apple Computer, not an S. There's not an S on the end. And it had this lovely little pretty picture of this little colourful apple. And I thought, oh, isn't that cute? And they had some what looked like computers. And, this is the days when I was still typing on a manual typewriter. And they wanted me to use this little application to capture all of their messages, phone messages, called email, which I proceeded to say to my husband at the time, well, that's never going to take off. But it was really interesting. And I was there for a 4-week assignment, and it was just so interesting. And I thought, wow, they're doing all these really interesting things. And then every assignment, then I was sort of seeking out sort of different technologies, and it just seemed really interesting. Now, at the same time, like my husband and I had a recording studio, so we had tech, but it wasn't high tech. It was 12 track studio. It was reasonably high tech for the time, and so I just became very interested, and so did my husband. He's also in the C-suite, so he's also at that level. So we both became very interested. He was a musician, I was a musician, and it just seemed to make sense. It was interesting. And because I'm a firm believer in being a lifelong learner, keeping a mind elastic and learning, technology seemed to be an avenue where it's just always changing. There's always something new, always something very exciting around the corner. I mean, we're looking at AI, chat GPT, machine learning, all that sort of stuff, and it's just very exciting. So yes, I was a singer, and that was interesting for a time, but you know, you learn what you learn, and then I just wanted to move into something that was interesting. And to be really honest, my mother was an accountant, and Kelly, I totally hear you. It's like, that was never going to be for me. I don't think accounting's changed.
Well,
yeah,
I was an accountant. But look, let's talk about this great book.
Yes.
Where is it?
Shameless plug. Shameless plug.
Yeah, this is the book. Where now means now. Tell us, and look, our listeners, if you've got any questions, make sure you ask. And this is a great book, Where Now Means Now. Just tell us a bit about what's the book all about.
So it is really about that moment when you realize that you just don't want to be in the role you're in anymore. That moment, you know, and it's like, oh my God, I just need to get out of this now. And what most people will do, and most people on this show, if I say this, it will resonate for at least, I think 95% of you. What you'll do at that moment, you'll update your resume and you'll go, I just need to get out of this job. I need to find something else. So you'll go for jobs, and what you'll do is you'll start thinking, well, I'll just go for what I know. So you'll apply for something similar at a different organization, and you'll think that it might be better. But what you'll find is if you get that role, you're just going into a different organization with a similar role, and then in a couple of years, you'll be in that same position. So what the book is doing is challenging you to say, think of something different. Don't be afraid to pivot. Be afraid not to. It really is about that. You can, and there's, as I said before, there's nothing wrong with doing sort of similar things if that's what really interests you. But if it doesn't, then break that cycle. Look for something that really brings you significant joy.
Kelly, you've done a fair bit of change in your career from a radio person. I mean, tell us a bit about your career, because you've changed a few times. Can you obviously can relate to what Mary?
Sounds so good, but I know it's funny you should say that, Mary, actually, because I have, but so I've got 2 degrees, totally chalk and cheese. My mum was an accountant as well, and she knew straight off the bat that numbers were not my thing. So no matter how hard I studied, it was 52%. I still remember that. And in English and history,
that's a pass. A pass is a pass, man. Exactly. A credit's a credit.
Yes. And so I still remember her laughing about that. But so no, I have 2 degrees, and I often found when I was transitioning, the question with interviews was, oh, why did you have that? You know, why did you change? So I went from studying as a journalist in communications and public relations to I went to medical school, and studied as an allied health professional specializing in mental health. So chalk and cheese, you know, very, very different. But what I can see now is how I'm able to use both skill sets, like you said, those transferable skills, and particularly, those different skills that you can use in any sector and are valuable as well. Yeah.
They really, really are.
Yeah.
And what I think is really interesting is when you think about it, if you think about where you started and then the allied health piece, communication was that stream that went through, and it seems to be that stream, that bit that for me, it's the connection, the interconnection. So what I love the most about my roles, no matter what role it is, I love people leadership. I love orchestrating, I guess you might say, but setting a strategy and taking people along that journey. And it's all around that communication. And when you sing and perform, you're communicating the original artist's intention for the song and how you interpret that intention. It's the same as when you are given a strategic document for an organization. It's how you are interpreting that and bringing that to life within your team. So that it's just the way in which you look at it, the way in which you frame it. But I love that. I have to say, having a mother as an accountant, my father was a musician. which is really very interesting. I have to say, though, my mother did ruin my joy of Monopoly, so I have to say that I'll never play Monopoly again.
I remember Mum could remember. She could remember number plates off by heart, numbers and figures, anything. My dad had an engineering business, and so she could remember every little detail, all the numbers and everything, and I could not remember a number to save myself. Yeah.
Okay, well, we can't let Julio off the hook here. We're sort of starting the book. We're going to get Julio to read this book. It's a great book. Don't forget, here it is. Again, Julio, let's have a look at the book. Where do we get this book from, Mary-Beth?
Okay, so the book can be purchased off of Amazon. At the moment, I'm in the middle of launch month. So if people want to reach out to me, they can do that via LinkedIn. But it is available on Amazon as an ebook, as well as the hard copy. So they can get that through that mechanism.
All right. Well, let's just run through the book. Know your purpose. Okay. What's that about? Because Julio, do you know your purpose, mate? What is your purpose?
My purpose at the moment is probably to answer your questions, Mark.
So know your purpose, choosing the right path, being open to the new, Julio. That's the first big chapter there. How you feel about those things?
I'm pretty comfortable with those, I think. I'm not sure about what questions I'm supposed to answer in detail, but I'll give it a go.
Well, let me ask you this, Julio. So have you heard of a thing? Has anyone on this and anyone in the audience heard of a Japanese concept called Ikigai?
Yes.
No.
Yeah. Ikigai is knowing your purpose, understanding what that is, what makes you tick. So if you read the book, it's very, very personal. We won't go into it because I would love the audience to purchase a copy, of course, and leave a review for me would be great. But it really is about when I was very young, I actually went through some interesting experiences in my youth, and it really set the stage for who I am today. And it has enabled me to really understand what my purpose is. So I encourage the individuals who are reading the book is to really understand what you believe your purpose is. Now, it's not the job purpose. It's your personal purpose. Mark, you have your purpose with the association that you work with.
Absolutely.
And you do that, and you know why you do that. If I were to ask you your purpose, you could probably talk to us for hours.
100%.
In that space, right? So we all will gravitate to those things that align with our personal value, our personal purpose. So that's what that is, Julio. I won't ask you to think of that now. It's a very deep sort of question to answer, but I really gave it significant thought. Certainly through COVID, I have to say COVID was challenging on a number of levels for everybody, and I'm no different to anybody else. But it was through COVID that I really, truly, truly dug deep and understood my purpose. I thought, and when you read the book, if you meet me and you've read the book, you'll go, oh my God, I totally get that of her, because it's in there, and it is very personal story. So I'm not going to ruin it for everyone, but please do have a read.
I like some of your takeaways you got here. Passion without purpose is not enough. Become an expert observer of yourself. I think those two things are quite, become an expert observer of yourself. What do you think about that, Cal? And passion without purpose is not enough. How are you feeling about the purpose stuff?
I think as Mary was saying, it's an ongoing, well, I definitely am, as someone is looking at that ongoing learning and that ongoing purpose, because you have different stages of life where that purpose may shift and other infecting influences. I was just going to say to you, Mary, during COVID, Mary-Beth, did you find during COVID, you yourself, but also clients had that shift of, because they had that time of rediscovering their purpose, and then coming out of many of the lockdowns, particularly here in Victoria, of going, now's the time to redirect myself.
Absolutely. But now so I think at that very beginning of COVID, everyone kind of hunkered down. Businesses got really scared. That first year, we all recall, right? There were lots of jobs, lots of layoffs, all those sorts of things. People got really scared and they weren't sure what was going to happen. So that took place. And government stepped in and helped people out, and that was fantastic. And then that second year, when that first year, we thought, oh, we're out of this now, and then we went back into more lockdowns. But businesses started to realize we can actually make this work. And so people sort of started to come out of that point of, oh, we can make this work. I can work remotely. I can do this. And then I've got a little bit more flexibility. Now what we're starting to see is that the byproduct of all of that is, am I really happy with what it is that I'm doing now? Things are opening up. I've got more flexibility potentially. But what is it that I'm doing that I want to be doing, and what do I want to move to? So we're starting to see a lot of movement in that marketplace. And I think that's just people resetting and taking that time. Kelly, you were right, taking that time to, they use the last 2 years to actually sit back and go, wow, what is it that I really want to be doing? And is this it? And so we're starting to see a lot of movement.
100%. And I was actually having a conversation with two managers yesterday and the day before in terms of, state budget announcements this week and how it's affecting hundreds and thousands. Keen to get your perspective on this, but I said to them, where do you think the growth areas are? I said, because that's what I'm focusing on, because, and they said, that's a really good point, Carol, to be thinking of that in that direction. Where are the growth areas now and in the future? And that's what I'm particularly focused on.
Oh, it's got to be tech. Tech is just
100%.
growing exponentially. Where Mark and I were, Mark came to my first book launch, and that was at the Digital Hub in Cremorne. And their purpose, one of their purposes in that organisation is to help reskill people in the IT space, and helping individuals who want to move into that space. It's exploding.
Yeah.
And it will continue to explode, but it will continue to evolve. And so individuals who want to make a pivot now's a great time to start learning. But the thing here is you can't stop your learning, especially in technology. You can't sort of go, well, I've just done a computer sciences degree or something, and then that's enough for me. You have to keep learning. You have to keep yourself up to date. Like, I'm a leader, so every couple of months I am undertaking leadership courses and learning more in that leadership space, and really looking at ways of, because leadership is changing and shifting. As I get older, I'm now leading 4 generations beneath me, and they are all very different in the way in with which they respond. So they're not what are we, Gen X? They're not like we are. It's like there's difference between work-life balance and things that are important to the different generations. You've got to keep learning. You can't just go in and be, well, this is how I led 20 years ago, it's how I'm going to lead now.
Yeah, it's a good point. I'm just going through the book. So we've got our purpose, and I agree with you about learning. Don't forget the plan is your next bit. And maybe that's what a lot of people do forget. They forget the plan. They're trying to transfer out of a job, but they're not sort of doing much planning. Is that sort of what you're getting there? You're sort of trying to do a bit of research and analysis.
Absolutely.
Is that,
yeah. So the planning piece, if any of you have ever done project management, you always have key milestones. As I said before, most of the time is you'll feel that sense of being trapped in a role you don't want to be in. So there's a sense of panic. And so what you do when you panic, I'm just going to get my resume out there and I'm going to do this. And then you start applying for jobs. And then what generally happens is you start applying for a lot of jobs. You don't put a lot of effort into each of those. And then the feedback you get is you don't get an interview, or you don't get the feedback that you're expecting. So it makes you feel worse. So you feel more trapped. And then you're on this cyclical thing. What I suggest here is plan. Think about it. This is the sort of job I want to go for. This is the sort of companies that I want to work with. I have what is my risk appetite in role? What is my dollar appetite? What is my well-being appetite? What are the companies I want to work for, or the industries I'd like to work within? what are the transferable skills I could bring to those industries so that I can then update my resume to then link in or at least narrate around those transferable skills if I don't have exactly the same skill that they are requesting. And the one thing, if you've got 4 or 5 of the key criteria, apply for the job. Don't look at it and go, oh, I haven't got, there's 10 criteria and I only have 6 or 7 of those. Apply, because you will have transferable skills.
100%.
I mean, I'm not saying you Kelly, you've done medicine, right? Allied health. Yeah, I'm not saying you know that you've got enough transferable skills to become a doctor. That's not, within reason. So the people on the call, within reason. So think about that. If you've got underpinning skill, underpinning qualifications if they're necessary, but you will have a ton of transferable skills that you can then think about. But plan it, because if you plan, then as you apply, you'll be targeting those areas you really want to work in.
Yeah.
Because the worst thing to do is you get offered the job somewhere that's exactly the same as what you're doing. And how is that going to benefit you? It might
All right,
be
we better check in on our client here. Julio, how you going there, Julio? You with us, mate? You keeping up?
I am, yeah. Very interesting. I just wanted to know with you, like we talk about key milestones of a project that you want to say your future. Do you find it quite important for you to set deadlines and also a completion date like you would in a normal scenario in that way? And how would you approach those? How would you approach those in a personal level? Like for an individual, how would you think a person should approach?
So you've got your plan. So when are you going to have your plan done? So put a date around that. Always put dates on things. I'm going to apply for 3 roles this week. Put those dates in, however you're going to approach that. I'm going to do my research. So I'm going to research and spend the next 2 weeks researching this role, etc. From that personal perspective, it's things such as if you write something down and commit to a date, then you're more likely to do it. So from a personal perspective, if you're thinking, I really do need to get, my health in check. So I need to maybe start doing a bit more exercise or walking more, set goals, realistic goals, and put dates around them. It's just, it's as simple as that.
It's starting to ring true a bit there, Julio. Now, Mary-Beth, we've got practice. Practice gives power, and under that, you've got the best advice ever. Now, I'm very intrigued to know what's the best advice ever.
Practice gives power. So if you practice, I say to everyone that works for me, and this is very interesting because I do know that the HR business partners and the HR managers that I work with always get really uncomfortable that I do this. But I say to every individual that works for me, my expectation is that you will go for at least 1 job interview every 6 months.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Why is that?
Because job interviewing is a skill.
Oh, yeah.
And I want people to know what's out there, because I want them to know that, hey, working in this business with Mary-Beth as a leader is really where I want to be. But you're never going to know that if you don't have data points to sort of refer back to. And I absolutely want team members to have choice, because what I actually want.
Can I just say, sorry, Mary-Beth, if you're working for me, please don't listen to the show. Just turn off now, because, I like everyone on long-term contracts.
But what it comes down to is I want them to have choice. Because if you've got choice, if you have choice, then it's a completely different game. It's a completely different conversation. And if you have that open communication with your leader, and your leader says, I want you to have choice, but I'm going to invest in you. I'm going to make sure that you are important. Your career is important. You'll be surprised. People will follow you. They'll follow you from job to job to job, because they actually want to be with somebody who cares about their career, cares about them as an individual, and cares about what it is that they achieve in their world. But it's a skill. So, and you need to practice it. So practice gives power. The worst thing you can feel is that sense. Okay, so here's that scenario again. So Julio, back to you, buddy. You don't want to be in your job. You don't want to be in your job.
Yep.
You don't know where you want to go, but you know you don't want to be where you're at. But you haven't been for a job interview for 3 years. Your resume isn't up to date. If you're on LinkedIn, you haven't kept that up to date. How trapped are you feeling right now, Julio?
Yeah, pretty trapped. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, you don't have any choice, do you? There's no choice whatsoever. But if your boss said, hey, you need to go for a job interview once every 6 months, which means your resume needs to be up to date, which means you have to put in a little bit of work. It's self-investment. Then you start looking for new roles and you go, oh, actually, I don't know if I've got the skill set for that, but it's something that really interests me. Then you'll start to develop where you want to go and start to think about your career. And I say it to a lot of people, don't just let your career happen to you. I mentor a lot of people and I'll say to them, and I think everyone on this call will know this, when you are asked the question, so how did you get to where you're at? A lot of people will say, I don't know, I just seem to fall into it. It seemed to just happen, and now this is where I'm at. So I really believe, take control of your career. You're going to be doing it for 40 years. You might as well, plan it out and sort of think about it.
Okay,
I
all right. We've got to
plan,
keep going.
so.
We've got to keep trying to get through the
I've
book
got another
tonight.
question for you before Mark races on to the next chapter. What about in the instances where, and I'm not sure if you've had clients like this, where I know many of my colleagues are in this position now, where it's that lack of stability, where there's ongoing short-term contracts. So they haven't gained that experience. They haven't gained that growth, and the company or organization or management or leadership aren't willing to invest in them.
Invest in yourself.
Mm.
So very early in my career, I was temping, and then I thought, I sat back, I did my joy matrix. I sat back and I thought, what really floats my boat? I love standing up in front of people. You come and see me at public speaking engagements. I'm in my absolute happy place. And for those people who don't like public speaking, you're going, oh my God. But for me, it's a happy place.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I really like that. So what roles enable me, and this is very early in my career, but what roles enable me to be in front of people? So I became a trainer and assessor, and the companies, I was temping, so no one was going to invest in me. So I went and did a Cert 4 in training and assessing and got that degree. And then I thought, oh, and this led into change management. And so I went and did train, and I paid for all my own training because that's what I wanted to do. So some companies, if you're not on contract and things, but I think that's very short-sighted. If you work in my team and you're a contractor, you're part of my team. There'll be training, there'll be those sorts of things, because I think we have an obligation to train the individuals within our teams and to make sure that they have stellar careers. But then I'm an anomaly when it comes to a leader. I don't know, but those were the things that I really wanted to have when I worked, and they weren't available to me. So I just made those things happen. Now, there's cost considerations and those sorts of things, but there is a lot of free training. There's a lot of free training out there that you can avail yourself to just to start learning.
Okay. Now we're going to come to you. It's 98.9 Northwest FM but we are on Facebook tonight through Community Heart Media, and looking forward to the top 5 in 5 coming up soon. Mary-Beth's top 5. But before we get there, having a team to back you up and taking direction. What are we talking about in those 2 chapters? What does Julio have to learn from that?
Okay, so I was a singer and I had a band. So, you're only as good as the people underneath you. So you have to have a team to back you up. But you also have to have sponsors and mentors and coaches, because they're all part of that ecosystem of what you class as a team. So, Julio, what you would need to do is think about who your mentors might be, who your coaches might be, and certainly who your sponsors are, and knowing the difference between the 3. So that's really important to understand that. I use a lovely sporting analogy for that. The coach helps you win the game, the mentor helps you win the season, but the sponsor gets you onto the pitch playing with the team you actually want to be with. So knowing the difference with those and being able to curate those, that's the team piece.
That's a great analogy. Love it.
And then the other piece is feedback, right? So understanding the right feedback to take. And I've received a lot of feedback in my career when I was singing. Oh my goodness, you just sometimes you go into an audition and there'd be hundreds of people and you just wouldn't even open your mouth to sing. It'd be like, you don't look right, so no, thank you.
Yeah.
And so, you learnt to be incredibly resilient, but understanding the right feedback and the feedback that you should be taking on board, and the feedback that sometimes it's meant with the best intention, but sometimes it's just that sort of feedback you might want to put to the side and say, you know what, that just doesn't resonate for me.
Mm.
There you go. This is powerful stuff for you, Julio, because we want you to understand and embrace change, mate. You've been stuck. You don't know what's going on, and we're trying to give you a bit of direction tonight.
Yes, I need a direction. I need a bit of direction.
Yeah, that's good, mate. Well, you got to, Mary-Beth, Julio's got to know his worth, doesn't he? Very important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how are we going to help him know his worth? He's not a bad bloke, Julio.
Oh, I think I know my worth. I'm worth a pie and hot coffee. That's about it.
Well, if it's a Ferguson Clare pie,
yeah.
Now we're talking about that, not
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
No, and it's a large takeout, right? So we're talking like $5.50, right?
That's right. Yeah.
You're only worth what somebody's going to pay for you, Julio. Isn't that what it is?
That's it.
Totally.
Okay, knowing your worth is really about just documenting the things that you do, what brings you joy, what you're prepared, what your not negotiables are. So I always find it really interesting. I know absolutely what my not negotiables are, and then I figure that everything else within reason. Like, I'm not going to be an astronaut. Let's face it. I think that ship has sailed, or that spaceship has sailed. But I know what my not negotiables are. I know what I'm not going to do. And I think if you know that, then you know everything else I think is open to you. Maybe it just requires a little bit of investment, a bit of time, but you really do need to start thinking about that. And then if you don't get an interview based on your resume, that gives you an understanding that maybe the resume is not hitting the mark. So what do you need to do to brush that up? And there are things you can do. You can send it out to people that you know in your network to have a look at that. You could work with a professional resume writer. You can do all these sorts of things. But it's a data point, as is everything else. If you go for your first interview and you don't get any further, then you understand, okay, then what are the things? If they give you feedback, that's fantastic. A lot of them won't. Right? But at least it's a data point. You can sit back going, okay, well, how could I have done that differently? And then again, you could work with somebody, you can talk to your friends. You've got a network of people that surround you. Ask them for your help. People will be really willing to help you. And again, curate the feedback.
Yeah.
Mary-Beth, what about if it's not necessarily someone who is transitioning or entering a new job market, but who has been doing the same thing for quite some time? And so they have to learn a new way of working, a new style of approach.
In a new job, or?
Not necessarily just in a new job, but, it may, or not necessarily a new field, but a different approach, So now, like you sort of touched on earlier, huge growth in their digital and IT space, but maybe they're not so, their strength is in other areas. What about that?
So I think that individuals need to understand their strengths and understand the transferable skills. That's the first piece, because it really, it shouldn't matter too much, but also get out of your own way. I think people are afraid. And Julio, you said you're afraid of change. You don't like change. Nobody likes change. And we certainly don't like it when it's thrust upon us and we feel we have no control. But then again, control is just an illusion, isn't it? We got that out of COVID for the last 2 years. So, but if you're stuck somewhere and you don't want to be there, then start to plan. What is it you're going to need to do to get out of that? You have to plan these things. You can't sit back going, and a lot of people go, oh, I just don't like what I'm doing, and then they do nothing. which I think is much worse.
Well, I'll tell you what,
I
Mary-Beth,
agree.
tonight's been fantastic on Community Heart Radio. If you're looking for another job, tonight's been really helpful. Listen to the show again. If you're stuck in your job, you don't know what you should do, tonight's show's been all for you. So we're going to come to Mary-Beth's top 5 points from the book or from her personal life, things that she feels is really good for you, in your career, in your personal life, how to change things, because this Mary-Beth is for our personal life as well, because a lot of us might have things in our own life that we want to change. It's not necessarily work. It's our, might be our relationship or our, friendships or whatever it is. Maybe not just work, but there's changes needed in all our lives in all sorts of different areas, don't you think?
I think so. My book is really around that sort of career space, but you could adapt it. I guess I like to sort of do that. I like to do that sort of more in the career side of it, because that was the target, because it's around that moment.
Yeah.
But there are other scenarios. I'm certain of it.
Yeah. Well, look, let's go for your top 5. What would be your first tip that you want to pass on to the listeners?
So I said it earlier, don't be afraid to pivot, be afraid not to. So if you really want to make a change, you need to make that happen. You are in control of your destiny. Know the difference between a coach, a mentor, and a sponsor, and learn how to cultivate them.
Is that number? That was number 2?
That's number 2.
Number 3. Because Julio's just writing these down, because he's going to write it down for himself, but he's also going to share it on the screen in a minute.
Mary, I was just going to get you to unpack that a bit about that pivot a bit more, as I was sort of touching on earlier, in terms of if someone is not necessarily wanting to, sick of a job per se, but they have been working in one way, but they're hesitant about pivoting and working in different ways. They may still want to work in the same field. How have you advised clients to overcome those challenges? And I can say, for example, I had a conversation with a colleague the other day, and several actually, given the circumstances at the moment, and many of them said to me, Cal, we just don't know how to upskill in that area. And they said, we've been working in this particular way, but we don't know how to upskill in that area. What do we do? Or how do we transition? They said to me, you've got experience in X, Y, and Z. We don't.
So they asked you, and that's the first step, isn't it? So you find somebody in that area and you ask that question, and you say, what did you do? How did you pivot? What were the courses? What were the things that you did? And then you take those on board, and then you research those, and then you invest and you do that work. But you have to do that work. So it's about that, and put a plan in place. So that's point number 3, I think we're at. Plan. Don't forget to plan. So put that in place. So if you're these people that are calling you and saying, hey, how did you do this? I work in this particular way, but I need to work in a new way. I would ask them, and depending on how old they are, reflect back to when you first started working. Did you have a computer then? And what sort of a computer did you have back then? Because if this was 20 years ago, then you would have had Lotus 1, 2, 3, So you will have adapted, and you will be able to adapt. It's that fear of change. It's that I can't do this. I need to be perfect. And there's that. So I'd say park the perfection piece to the side and have a go. You have to sort of go and try before you buy and do those sorts of things. But really around that, if I'm working in a very specific way, draftsmen back in the day used to draw things manually, and then suddenly it became CAD drawings and all electronic. What did they do? They had to change and learn that new technology to then take that on board. How is it any different to what these individuals are going through? And a way of working will change and shift in that way. So speak to people that you think are expert in that space so that you get the right advice, and listen to that. And then undertake some courses and see what it is. Or if it's a way of working, see if you can second into another space to work in that space to see if I like it. Do those sorts of things. There are many avenues.
We've got another comment from Sarah Brown. Wants to ask you, don't be afraid to pivot. Love this. To Mary, how do you know when it's the right time to pivot? Is this the same as taking risk?
So, Sarah, you know it's the right time. You will know it intrinsically with everything that you do. Every day will feel harder to get up. You'll be like, oh, I'm not getting joy out of this job. This is just not what I want to be doing. You'll have those moments where you go, oh, no, it's okay. And then it will just feel hard. When it starts to feel like a lot of hard work, that's the time. Pivoting is a risk. It is risky, but it's about mitigating the risk. So thinking about it. So when you go back to a plan, if you're into project management, you will always think about the risks and you'll mitigate those. So when you start to put a plan in place, you'll say, okay, my plan is I need to update my resume. I want to start doing some research. I want to do these sorts of things. I want to go for an interview. If I'm not comfortable speaking to my boss, then I won't, but I'll go to an interview and I'll see what's out there because I want choice and I want to ensure that I am, when the time is right, ready to interview, and I can do that successfully without feeling like...
What number were we up to? We're up to 3 or 4 now?
Well, number 3 was planned, so don't forget to plan. Yep. Number 4, networking. Get out there and network with people, but be choosy about networking. Don't go to an opening of an envelope. I mean, goodness sakes, think about what you want to do. Your time is as valuable as everybody else's, but when you are networking, really go in with an open mind and go in wanting to meet and connect with people. Networking, you never know. You never know when you're speaking with somebody at a networking event. And I always like to ask people, you know, what keeps them awake at night? What are the things that are important to them? And then certainly then that feeds over into, and networking is internally in your business as well as externally, as well as virtually. So when I say networking, I mean the whole gambit of it, but certainly within your business, speak to key decision makers and see if you can help them with something. That's usually a really good way of sort of understanding what your business is going through and what the leadership's going through and how you might be able to add value. And then finally, don't let your career happen to you. Take control of your career.
Okay, well, it's been great having Mary-Beth here with us. She's written this great book. Julio, let's just see the book again. Sorry about that. When Now Means Now. So it's a great book. It's available on Amazon. It's just been fantastic having Mary-Beth with us. Let's just quickly run through her top 5, Julio.
Yes. Number 2, I didn't get, actually. So you have to pardon me. I was fighting computer here at the moment. So number 1, don't be afraid to change. Learn to pivot. Number 2, I missed out. So I got number 3, don't forget to plan. Number 4, get out and network. And number 5, don't let your career happen to you.
So number 2 was know the difference between your coach, your mentor, and a sponsor.
You need all of them, don't you?
You do, but you might not need them all at the same time.
Time, yeah. Well, Sarah wanted to thank you for your advice. Julio, so Sarah there, just wanting to thank Mary for her advice. Thanks, Sarah, for your comment there. It's been just great having Mary-Beth on tonight. Really, really great having you here. Don't forget to get the book. Kelly, has that been helpful for you tonight?
It has. It definitely has. And I think it's really good to keep hearing and listening to a story such as yours, Mary-Beth, and to read your book, because it doesn't matter at which stage we're at. It's really good to be able to, like you said, to pivot and to really assess, is this where we want to be? What do we enjoy doing? What brings us happiness as well? Very important. So thank you.
And Julio, we're all about helping you tonight, mate. It's all about you, buddy. Did we help you out or not tonight?
Yes, you did. You helped me out a heaps. And I just remember there, Mary-Beth, about me. I started with a Mac when I first started working, but it was known as a Macintosh back then.
Yes.
I
have a Gen 2 Newton sitting downstairs.
Oh
my God. Right. And it still works.
Are they
anybody knows what a Newton? No, well, it's large.
Now, don't forget, guys, a lot of people think Julio's amazing. They want to meet him in person. You've got a chance to meet Julio tomorrow night at the Big Brothers and Big Sisters Art Auction Dinner, Julio.
Woo!
So Don't forget, we've got the Arts Auction Dinner at the Pavilion Arts Centre tomorrow. Community Heart Radio's happened to got 2 tickets going 2 tickets going to that tomorrow night. You're not going to have to message us tonight if you want those tickets. So just send us a message on Community Heart Radio, and you might be eligible to win those 2 tickets to that. They're worth $290 a ticket, Julio. So we're giving away 2 tonight. So it's a really good gift. The dinner is tomorrow night, as I say, at Arts Centre. It's a great prize, great night coming, supporting a great cause, Julio. What do you reckon, mate? You looking forward to the dinner?
I am. I'm looking forward to dinner. That'll be really good to be there.
All right, so you want to
some
be
of the art pieces are spectacular, I have to say, Mark. I have checked out on the website. Fantastic. If you haven't had a look at what's up on auction.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a very special night. And so if you want to come along, just contact Community Heart on our Facebook, message us, and we've got 2 tickets to give away. The first 2 coming in will get it. And Mary-Beth, it's just been so good having you on tonight. Thanks for coming. Final comments to our audience?
Look, when now means now, and you will know when that point comes. So please just don't be afraid to be afraid not to. Thank you, Julio. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the book. But really, it just is as simple as that.
Thank you so much, Mary-Beth.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. Tune in every Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. or watch us on YouTube, Facebook, and follow us on LinkedIn and other social media.